Okay, so in this next example, imagine that you're an advertiser and there's an event coming up that you're responsible for promoting. So what you've decided to do is you're going to make posters and you're going to hang them up all over town just to let people know that this event is happening. So designing a poster, though, that's a lot of work, right? So you've decided to outsource that to somebody else and you found a local artist that's willing to do it for you for $500. Now that's an example of a fixed cost because it doesn't matter whether you produce 1,000 posters, 100 posters, 10 posters, just one poster, or maybe the event gets canceled and the plans change and you don't print any posters at all. You still have to pay the artist for designing that poster for you. So that's an example of a fixed cost because it's independent of the level of production. Okay, but let's say something happens along the way. You get a phone call a couple of days later, and they say, "Hey, I found a couple of images that I think will be really effective in this advertisement. I'd like to put them in the poster, but they're not cheap. Okay, they're copyrighted images, and the original creator of those images is charging a $200 fee for a license to use them for this purpose. So that's going to be an additional cost. Okay, so let's identify that as well. And that again, that's going to be another fixed cost because that's something you just have to pay once. You don't have to pay that fee over and over again every time you produce a poster. You just have to pay it once at the beginning. You can produce as many posters as you like. Okay, but now there's other costs. So now there's the costs of actually printing these posters. So for each poster that you print, you've got to pay for the paper, which we're told that costs 5 cents a sheet. You have to pay for the ink. So there's a 15-cent ink charge for each poster. And then I don't know if you've ever seen what happens when you staple a piece of paper to a telephone pole and it rains the next day. Well, it's barely recognizable the next day. It pretty much falls apart, right? So laminating these posters is an important step as well, and that's going to make them more durable. Okay, so all the costs associated with these posters is summarized in this table. We've got our one-time costs. That's another way of saying fixed costs, right? You just have to pay those fees once, but then you also have your unit costs, and this is another way to say your variable costs. So for each unit you produce, you have to pay for the paper, the ink, and the lamination. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to determine the fixed cost of producing a poster. Okay, so well, we've kind of already addressed this. The fixed cost, we've got to pay for the poster design, the artist that we've hired. So that's going to be $500. But then we also have to pay for the license to use the two images that the designer has requested. So that's another $200. So that's going to result in a total cost of $700 for the fixed costs. That's our total fixed cost. Okay, well, great, that part's done. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to determine the variable cost of producing a poster. Okay, so in other words, how much does it cost for each poster that you actually produce? Okay, well, let's write this as the variable cost per unit. Okay, so for each poster that we produce, we're going to have to pay for the paper, which is 5 cents. We're going to have to pay for the ink that goes on the paper. That's another 15 cents. And then we're also going to have to pay 40 cents for the lamination. I don't know if these costs are realistic, to be honest, but I think it still makes sense. So then 60 cents is the total when you add those up. So 60 cents for every poster that we produce. Okay, so we've got our fixed cost of $700 and 60 cents for the variable cost per unit. So now we're going to say, okay, what is the total cost to produce Q posters? So just like in the previous example, we're going to introduce this as a formula that depends on Q, right? So if I produce no posters at all, for example, let's say I just pay the artist and then I don't actually end up producing any posters. Well, then my total cost is going to be $700. But if I produce some posters, it's going to cost me more. And in fact, if Q is large, if I produce many posters, then my expenses are going to be even higher. So the way we're going to write this is we're going to write this as capital C, that's just short for cost, and then just like we did in the previous page, we're going to write this as a function of Q, because the value of Q is going to determine what that total cost is. Okay, so, and just like I did before, let me add this annotation just to clarify. So the cost is a function of Q, really just because it depends on Q. Okay, so, well, remember what the total cost is? It's just your total fixed cost plus your total variable cost, right? So our fixed cost is $700, and then our variable cost is 60 cents multiplied by the number of units we actually produce. So we'll have 0.60, that's the 60 cents, and it's multiplied by Q, which is the number of posters that we actually produce. So that is your cost function. And that's the same, that's really what you're looking for. If you see language like this, determine the total cost to produce Q posters, and you're not actually told how many posters are being produced, or in general, let's say that's units or items. You're not told how many items are actually being produced, then really what you're looking for is you're looking for the cost function. Okay, so what about the last part here? Determine the total cost to produce 300 posters. So that's the same question, except in this case, you know exactly how many posters you're producing. In this case, it's 300. So to answer that question, we've already found the cost function, so all we have to do is plug in 300. So C of 300 is going to give us 700 plus 0.60 multiplied by 300. So, and this is another case where you're more than welcome to use a calculator for this, but I'm just going to show the details. We're going to get $700 plus 60 cents multiplied by 300. That's actually going to be $180. And so if you add those together, you'll get $880. So let's answer this in a sentence. So the total cost to produce 300 posters, I'll just say for 300 posters, is $880. Now, I didn't leave myself enough room here. $880. When you're if you're using a sentence to answer the question, then make it look professional, right? You want to clean it up and actually put the dollar signs in. So when we're doing our calculations, quite often we'll omit the dollar signs, like here and here. If we're just working with numbers that we're actually going to need to plug into something else later, I'll often omit the dollar signs. But when you're actually, if you're answering the question as a final answer, you're putting everything together. Now that would be the time to actually include the dollar sign.